And now back to Around the Kit with Joe Gansas.
Guys, we are live 646-787-8027. My first guest of the evening is up, and I'm going to call him. So here we go, calling the great Gregg Bissonette.
There you are.
How are you, Greg?
I'm good. It's weird you called me because I looked on my missed calls. I've been driving. No call came through, and it doesn't even show a missed call, so it's crazy. And then I tried to call back, and it said all circuits are busy. So I don't know what's going on. Anyway, we're talking now. We're talking now. How you doing?
I'm good. I got to give you the proper introduction. Guys, on the line now is one of the greats of all time, one of the most versatile drummers, and I welcome the great Gregg Bissonette to the kit. Greg, Joe Gansas, how are you, brother?
Joe, I'm doing great. How are you?
I am pumped up. I mean, I've been a fan since, honestly, 85, but we'll get into that. How you doing today? What's going on, bro?
Oh, I'm doing really good. I'm just heading down into Santa Monica for a recording session that starts in about an hour, and life is good, and yeah, everything's great. Thank you.
Good, brother. I want to go back a little bit. We're 10 years difference. I want to go back to 1959, Detroit, Michigan, and I want to talk about so many things. Take me back. What a cool area to grow up with. People don't know there's so much music that came out of Detroit. You know, take me back to the age 5 when you first started playing, and the impact that a Bud Bissonette had on you early, your father.
Oh, thank you, Joe. Well, yeah, my mom, Phyllis Bissonette, was a vibraphone player in my dad's band, Bud Bissonette, and they always had music on in the house. Their biggest hero was Stan Kenton. They were always playing the Stan Kenton Orchestra, Buddy Rich, Maynard Ferguson, Woody Herman, Count Basie, Duke Ellington, Charlie Parker, Dizzy Gillespie, Stan Getz was another hero, Dave Brubeck with Paul Desmond, and they listened to a lot of classical music too. They always had music going on in the house, whether it was a jazz radio station or it was their great record collection. But they knew that I loved the Beatles, and they started to really love the Beatles when they came out. My dad was playing a wedding at the hotel where the Beatles were staying when they played in Detroit in 1966 when I was 7, and he got tickets for our family to go see the Beatles in Detroit at Olympia Hockey Arena where the Red Wings used to play. And so I got to see Ringo play live when I was 7, and because of their love for music, they would always, encourage us to listen to the radio. And the radio in Detroit, there was a 24/7 Motown station that came out of Windsor, Canada, called CKLW, and it was such a beautiful education into just really knowing about soul music and Motown, and of course James Brown was huge, and the Jackson 5, the Temptations, the Supremes, so many of the great, Smokey Robinson, the great Motown acts. So I really got a pretty incredible music education just growing up in Detroit.
Yeah, absolutely. And we mentioned your father, Bud. Your mother, Phyllis, played piano and vibraphone. Your sister, Kathy, played violin. Of course, we know about the great work your brother, Matt, has done. Growing up in a very musical family, Gregg Bissonette, was it sometimes a good place to just sit back and listen to what's going on rather than playing all the time? I think we should be listening more in life.
Yeah, it seemed like every Friday night since I was little, my dad would always put on records. He'd come home from work, we'd have dinner, and my dad would put on albums, and he encouraged me to just sit down on the floor. We'd take album covers and a couple pairs of brushes, and we would just jam along, but we were playing so soft with the brushes, we couldn't really hear what we were doing. We heard the big console stereo, so we were listening, always listening And we always went to live concerts, and there just were so many every month. There was one of those big bands I mentioned, Maynard, Buddy Rich, Woody Herman, Dan Kent. The first live show I ever saw was the Count Basie Orchestra with Harold Rufus Jones. I think I was probably 6 years old, even before I saw the Beatles. And listening, Joe, you're right. We all need to listen more. And in the teaching I do, I always ask college students, who are you listening to? And whether it's Snarky Puppy or a band called Tame Impala or all these new bands I've never heard of, I'm really into listening to new stuff. And Maynard Ferguson was that way. He was a huge fan of always listening to new stuff.
Yes, absolutely. Guys, we're talking to the tremendous Gregg Bissonette. He has been so nice to give me some time. One of the busiest drummers in the business, and that's just beautiful. 5 years old with your father, then we get to 10 years old, and you start taking lessons and studying with Bob Yarborough. Talk to me about Bob. Talk to me about Bob Yarborough and your father, and what the difference was on the perspective of both, teachers.
Yeah, thank you. Well, my dad said, your mom and I want you to study. We want you to study with someone that reads well, someone that knows the rudiments, that can really teach you how to hold your stick. My dad said he was self-taught. He didn't read music, and he was a band leader, and he really knew how to play. His hero was Chief Krupa, and he knew how to play, in a wedding band, a party band, a band that played for, events around Detroit. But he said, I want you to study with someone, and we found out through our school district that Bob Yarborough was the guy. He really knew his rudiments, and he took me through, of course, Haskell Harr Book 1, Haskell Harr Book 2, then all the NARD book, National Association of Rudimental Drummers, and then he got me into books like Rock and Bass Drum by, I don't know who that was by, all the Joel Rothman books, the Jim Chapin book, and then he recommended me to another teacher, Hiram McDonald, who played in the Detroit Symphony, but who was really into the Chapin book and George Lawrence Stone and stick control, and he started helping me with charts, and then he got me into wanting to study with a local drummer that was a really great all-around drummer named Mark Bertacci. And Mark would be working on Maynard charts with him, and he'd play the record, and he had the charts, and he really helped me out a lot. Then I went down to North Texas. I had a great band director in middle school, Jerry Haspatcher, who was also a great drummer, and then a great high school band director, Bill Baker, who was a great woodwind specialist. And I was going to go to Berkeley, but he said, man, you ought to check out North Texas. And Steve Houghton was the drummer in the 1 O'Clock Band, and I heard that album, and I made a beeline for North Texas.
Yeah, and it's, as they say, the rest is history. When we talk about a Bob Yarborough and a Myron McDonald and all the educators and teachers you worked with, even your father, after all these years, Gregg, do you still say to yourself, thank you, and are they still with you today when you're doing things? Do you still think about them, and you might play something and say, wow, thanks to them? Are they still with you?
They are still with me, Joe, yes, especially my mom and dad. We just had the NAMM show in L.A., the yearly January National Association of Music Merchants, and there isn't a day in my life doing recording sessions and working around town, but especially at the NAMM show, at the NAMM show, every day I get hundreds of friends, and we're all friends in the drumming industry. There's such a huge community of people that say, boy, I sure miss Bud. They knew my dad because my dad was with me at every NAMM show, hanging with Armand Zildjian and Vic Firth and Larry DiMuzio and Remo Belli and Lloyd McCausland and John DeChristopher and Craigie and Debbie Zildjian. My dad was in the thick of it, and he lived for being my drum tech in L.A. and for going to that NAMM show every year. And when I play, oh my gosh, even Ringo knew my dad. And I actually gave Ringo a few months ago my dad's ride cymbal that I grew up playing want you to have this. He says, I can't take this. Here's your dad's. I said, you got to take it. My dad's beaming down from heaven. Today's his birthday, November 11th, Veterans Day. He'd be 85. You're 76. He took me to see you. You got to take this symbol. And he's been playing it on the gig. So, yeah, my dad's and my mom and all those teachers are so with me every day. I just had an incredible, blessed childhood and, growing up in that kind of family.
Absolutely, brother. And we've all been with you in your corner all these years, over 35 years in the business. One of the best. Later on, talk to me about a band called Today's People.
Boy, you've really done your research. I love this. Today's People was a band that my brother and I had with a flute player named Carl Muntean and my then guitar-playing girlfriend, Leanne Harold was her last name, and we had a band. It was kind of based on the band Chicago, because I'm a Danny Seraphin fanatic. And then that band turned into, check this out. I told this to Danny. I said, Danny, we went and got light blue T-shirts from Kmart, and we ironed on Chicago cursive logo, and we put a Roman numeral 2. We were Chicago too. He said, tell me you weren't Chicago too. I said, Danny, we were Chicago too. We played all Chicago songs. And a great guitarist, Brian Biggs, and a great keyboard player named Sante Bologna, a great trombone player named Bert Snover, a great sax player named Eric Cott, and a great trumpet player named Rick Castruba. And we had this band, and we played all the high school dances. We had a blast, and we were a Chicago tribute band before the tribute band thing really got big, and we changed our name to Grand Circus Park. We started playing a lot more Beatles and Zeppelin, Aerosmith, and all kinds of other songs too. Because you can't really play the high school dance and only play Chicago.
Yeah, great stuff. Just a great story. Thank you for that, brother. Later on, we attend a prestigious school. I've had so many guests. I think Keith Carlock, Rich Redmond, and yourself. UNT, University of North Texas. Did UNT give you what you were looking for in a college?
Yeah, it did in many ways. When I moved out to Los Angeles, I kind of found out how I was deficient because we never really got, the United States of America was not really allowed to get into Afro-Cuban music when I was in college. I mean, back in the 60s, Joe, I'm not sure how old you are. When you said there's a 10-year gap, are you 47?
I was born in '69. Yes.
Yeah. So we're 10 years apart. Well, when I was a little kid, there was a ban of the airwaves and there was a ban of the Cuban Missile Crisis with JFK and Fidel Castro. We couldn't hear Cuban music. They couldn't hear Motown. Many of my Cuban friends that escaped the Castro regime have told me, they would have loved to have heard Motown and the Beatles, and we would have loved to have heard Cuban music. But when I got to L.A., I got to study with guys like Luis Conti, Horacio El Negro Hernandez, Machito Sanchez, Richie Galante Garcia, and the great Changuito from Cuba. And I realized when I was at North Texas, we didn't have a clue about clave, 2-3-3-2, rumba clave, son clave. We didn't understand salsa. I got into playing samba stuff because of the great Steve Gadd. Steve Gadd was the guy when I was in college. He's still the guy. But that was more of an Americanized. I think Chick Corea turned him on to the cowbell and Mozambique stuff to an extent. But when I look at the overall thing, I had a lot to learn about pop music and Latin music coming out of North Texas. But luckily, I was in a band in Dallas called Buster Brown, and they were like a Stevie Wonder, Earth, Wind, Fire type funk band. So and Tower of Power, and I really learned a lot from that band. But North Texas helped me a lot with jazz, with reading, small group, big band, orchestral playing, percussion playing, marching band. I played in the drum line. But, no school is perfect. And there were always things. I brought a double pedal down there. Before DW had a double pedal, there was the Zalmer Twin double pedal by Richard Zalmer. And I brought that down there. and they didn't know what to do with that. He's got a double bass drum pedal, so I really loved double pedal since as a kid, being into Louis Bellson, the guy that first played on Skin Deep, Duke Ellington, in 1946. So, it was a little bit closed-minded in some ways, but as I got into other stuff, the greatest thing about the school to me was that there were students. I remember a guy named Azande Cumming, who I think was from New York, who was an African American guy that he was the shot in the arm for the African stuff. And there were guys from all over the world, and there were 120 other drum set players. I probably learned more from those students than I did the teachers, and the teachers were phenomenal. Ron Fink, Henry Oxtell, phenomenal teachers. But those were only one lesson a week. I learned so much from the students because there was 125 drum set guys, Joe.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Just I've heard so many great things about that college. Guys, we're talking to the tremendous Gregg Bissonette. He's been so nice to give me some time today. A couple of steps later, you and your brother Matt, who you've been just joined at the hip, playing with since a little kid, even till to now, you've played in so many projects. You've joined the Maynard Ferguson Band, and wow, I know this was just tremendous for you. A big fan. How was this experience, Gregg, early in your career? And if anything, what did you learn from it, this experience, and did it help you realize what was to come in the music business?
What a great question, Joe. The greatest thing I learned from the whole experience, especially of getting the Maynard Ferguson gig, which was a dream of mine since I was 14 years old, was people skills. My parents always taught me, half the pie is playing. The other half of the pie is people skills. How do you get along with people? Are you somebody that lifts people up? Are you somebody that's funny, that lifts people up, that can be positive, like a Louis Bellson? Or are you somebody that's negative, that complains, that puts people down, that backstabs to get gigs? You don't want to be the latter. You don't want to be the negative person. You want to be the positive person that lifts people up, like a Dom Famularo, a guy that people want to hang around with. So I was trying for years to get in with the Maynard Ferguson camp, to no avail. And I was sending cassette tapes and resumes and everything you could do. And I finally started to realize, after talking to guys backstage in the band, it's really about who you know. If you know somebody, and they want to, the drummer leaves, and the sax player brings his best friend from college in. So I helped get my brother the gig, and then my brother helped get me the gig. Basically, I was driving down the street in Denton, Texas. I was just about to graduate from college, and I saw the Maynard Ferguson bus. It literally said Maynard Ferguson outside of the bus on the header, like, we're going to Queens, Maynard Ferguson. So I get to my hotel, I get to my apartment, and I pick up something that kids don't know about these days, but it was called the phone book. And I looked up the Holiday Inn. I called the Holiday Inn on my landline, and somebody answered, "Hello, Holiday Inn. Yes, could I please be connected to Maynard Ferguson?" Sure. It starts ringing. So I'm being connected to Maynard Ferguson. There's a hello. I said, "Hello, Maynard." He said, "No, this Maynard's not in the room right now. This is Stan Mark, his lead trumpet player. I'm picking up some T-shirts from Maynard's room because I sell the T-shirts." I said, "Stan, I know all about you. I know you're the lead trumpet player. I know you sell the T-shirts because I bought them from you after the show around the intermission." I said, "My name's Gregg Bissonette. I'm a huge fan of Maynard. I'm the drummer in the 1 O'Clock Lab Band here at North Texas." He said, "Wait a minute. You go to that one-dimensional, very elitist jazz swing school in North Texas, and you like Maynard? I've heard that students from there don't like Maynard because it's a straight-ahead school. They like the Woody Herman Band. We're too rock and roll for the North Texas guys." I said, "No, man, Ringo's my hero, even more than Buddy Rich. Ringo's the guy. I love the Beatles. That's why I got into music, because of the Beatles." I said, "I love Maynard, and I play trumpet too. Not that well, but can I invite you guys to come down to Dallas tonight and sit in with our band after the gig?" And he said, "Oh, no, thanks anyway. But we have a bus driver that's, older. He goes to sleep. Maynard wouldn't come. Dallas is an hour away." I said, "Stan, I got a plan. I have 5 friends with station wagons. They'll pick you guys up after the gig. I can't make the Maynard gig because I'm playing, but they'll pick you up. bring you down to Dallas. Your names will be on the guest list. You'll get in free. Drinks are on the house. You sit in with the band. He said, we're there. And the whole band came out, and Stan afterwards said, bro, your band sounds great. I do the hiring and firing. We have a drummer right now named Dave Mancini, but when he leaves, the gig is yours. And I just went, man, this is how it's done. It's people skills. And then they needed a bass player about 2 months later. Dave Mancini called me and he said, hey, I know you're next in line for my gig. Do you know of a great bass player and keyboard player? I said, yeah, my brother Matt on bass and Ron Pedley on keyboards. He said, well, get us a tape. They probably got the gig. They got him a tape and they got the gig. And Maynard was the greatest leader you could ever work with, man. He was so, he was just always inspiring you. He didn't yell. He didn't put people down. He just loved putting on the gig tape afterwards. And that's where you learn how the gig went. You listen to a gig tape.
Yes, guys, we're talking to the great Gregg Bissonette. Gregg, what a story, and it's a story where I talk about on my show a lot, and what that story just told me, it showed me my least favorite word in life, how I don't like to use it. My least favorite word is can't. Don't tell me I can't do something, because you could have just said, it's a no. It's a no, but we're not going to find out in life unless we try, brother. We pick that phone up. What's the worst they can say? You already have no in the back of your head, so give it a try. You know, bro?
Right, and then I love that, Joe, and that's a great, word to have as your least favorite word. I always say be politely persistent. As long as you're not being a pain in the neck, or just stalking somebody or just calling all the time and being a nuisance. If you're politely persistent, and then you can back it up, then you got to go for it. And there's one other element that I have to have, and this is personal in my life, and the one thing that's gotten me through everything in my life and helped me, I know, focus, and I know it's helped me get gigs, and that's prayer. The power of prayer in my life. Oh, yeah. I prayed for the Maynard gig. I prayed for the David Lee Roth gig. I prayed for the Ringo gig. And I think you've got, for me, if you've worked hard and you've taken the talents that God's given you and you try to do things, the right way, but you're really, if it's God's will and you're praying about it, I think that's major.
Just tremendous stuff. Greg, we all have those people in life we look up to. You've been one of mine for a long time. My favorites are like you, Steve Smith, Simon Phillips. Not a bad group there, to have as your people. So just a three great drummers, all friends of yours, I'm sure, for years.
Yeah. Both of those guys, both Steve Smith and Simon Phillips, are not only heroes of mine, because they're maybe 2 or 3 years older, not much. But I really, when Journey hit, man, I was still am a humongous Journey fan. And Steve's back with them. Steve came to our sound check in 1982 with Maynard, because he's a huge big band guy. He let me come to their sound check at the Enormo Dome. We were in the Clubfoot. They were in the Enormo Dome. We became dear friends since then. Simon Phillips and I have been dear friends since way back in also 1982 when he played with Al Di Meola, and then when he played with Mick Jagger. I played with David Lee Roth when he played with Mick Jagger. We were in the night before, and I got to see him at the Melbourne Tennis Center in Australia. And the next night, he came to our gig, and we've been dear friends. In fact, my brother, all week this week, has been working with Simon, producing an artist, and my brother's playing bass and singing on the album. So, yeah, Steve Smith and Simon Phillips, what a great honor it is to be included in that breath with those guys, Joe.
And if I'm correct, you helped out Simon in Toto when he had some problems. You helped him out. Is that correct?
Yes. Back in 1995, they had finished Chuck Porcaro, God rest his soul, one of my heroes, all of us. Yeah. He had passed away, and Simon became the drummer in Toto. They had just finished an album with Simon called Taboo. But Simon had, I think, some issues with his back or something. He couldn't go on the road. And I ended up doing a whole 4-month European Toto tour, and it was just a blast. And it was an honor to help how to do that.
Talk to me about guys. You mentioned Danny Serafin, and we'll get to Ringo. But one guy who I've always loved his playing and great sounds on those early Pat Benatar albums, the great Myron Grombacher. I know you're a big fan. What was it about this great drummer's playing that intrigued you?
Yeah, that's a great question. Myron is one of my all-time best friends. We live near each other. We hang out all the time. We play double drums. We've even got a drum duet that we played at several drum festivals. He's an incredible drummer, an incredible role model, an incredible husband, incredible dad to his family. And he is from the Midwest, where I'm from. I'm from Detroit. He's from Youngstown, Ohio. And when I drove out to L.A. from North Texas, I wanted to be a rock drummer. And there were two cassettes I had in my car. One was Rick Springfield's Success Hasn't Spoiled Me Yet.
Yeah.
I think that was Jack White, Mike Baird on it. Great rock drumming, great sound. At Sound City, where Dave Grohl talks about. And the other one was Myron Grombacher, a live album with Pat Benatar called Live from Earth. And I wanted to meet this guy. I wanted to know what made him tick. And by the grace of God, after I got back from the Maynard Ferguson tour, I was walking down a street called Sherman Way, where they have pawn shops. And I see Myron, and he's out looking for a Fender Telly. And I said, "Are you Myron Grombacher, the Pat Benatar drummer?" And he said, "Yeah." I said, "My name's Greg. I just got up the road with Maynard Ferguson." He goes, "Maynard Ferguson? Wow, you must know how to read and all that." I said, "Yeah, I do." I said, "Do you teach?" And he goes, "I don't teach. I'm kind of self-taught." But he said, "We should get together and play some drums." And we did. And that was 1983. And that was the beginning of a great friendship.
Great. I always loved his playing and great sound. I always loved his drum sound on those Pat Benatar albums. Just great stuff.
Well, those were really great sounding maple oversized Ludwig. And he even loaned me those drums to use on David Lee Roth, Eat 'Em and Smile.
Well, you just segued to my next question. Guys, we're talking to the legendary and one of the nicest people in the business, Gregg Bissonette. You've been involved in so many projects, Greg. We can be here till Christmas talking about it. I always ask my guests if there was one game changer, that changing moment. It might not have been the best thing you've been in, but in '85, being involved with David Lee Roth and Steve Vai and Billy Sheehan, was that one of those game changers where you look back and says, "Thank God for that"?
No, Joe, that was the game-changing moment for me. I mean, I was concerned living in L.A. That I would be branded as a one-trick pony, because you don't want to be, a jazz guy only, or a Latin guy only, or a rock guy only, or an R&B guy only, or a classical guy only, or a drum corps guy only. You want to try to be all around, like my favorite all-around drummer, Vinnie Colaiuta, or like a Steve Smith. These guys can play anything, or Simon Phillips. They can read anything, play anything, any style, whether it's a TV show date or an orchestra date or a movie. One week Vinnie Colaiuta played on a Faith Hill album. The next week he played on a Megadeth album years ago.
Yeah.
But that's the breadth and the style of the spectrum there. So I got an audition again through a lot of prayer and the grace of God with David Lee Roth. And I'll tell you what, I was looking at Dave and he said, "Cool, bro. Well, before, we go on to this audition, who have you been playing with?" And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm dead in the water. I'm going to tell him Gino Vanelli, and he's not going to know who that is. He's going to think, oh, he's a fusion pop Canadian guy. I said, Gino Vanelli. And he said, "You mean Brother to Brother? That album with Mark Cranny and Graham Lear on those other albums? Man, I know about Gino Vanelli. He's awesome. How's Gino doing?" And I'm going, this guy knows music. And he said, "What'd you do before that?" And I said, "Now I'm really dead in the water." I said, "Dave, Maynard Ferguson." He goes, "Maynard Ferguson, the high-note trumpet player specialist that covered Herbie Hancock's Chameleon and the theme from Rocky?" And I'm looking at him going, this guy really is a musicologist. David Lee Roth is a really smart guy and a really musical guy. And he said, "Man, if you can power that big band, surely you can power Steve and Billy and you and I. Welcome to the band. Payday starts Friday."
Greg, And I got to tell you, I played in a band 25 years ago, and we did 2 songs of yours back then, and I got goosebumps from this 2-minute and 23-second masterpiece called Elephant Gun. Talk to me about that. Like a shuffle, almost like a shuffle double bass beat with the ride cymbal. Just a great song. What do you remember about that time and that song?
Well, first of all, that lick, that came about from Byron Grombacher. He has incredible double bass feet, and he showed me this lick that was also more used on a song on Skyscraper called The Bottom Line. So Byron showed me that. I injected some of that into the Elephant Gun, but my heroes, 2 of my big drum heroes are Billy Cobham and Alex Van Halen. And Billy Cobham did what's the name of the song? It was on the album Spectrum. I'm spacing on the name of it, but it's a real fast double bass, phenomenal piece on Spectrum. And anyway, Alex Van Halen in a Modern Drummer interview with Robin Plant, he said, "Yeah, I pretty much got that from the Billy Cobham, the Spectrum album, when he played that great shuffle." Right. So I loved Hot for Teacher, and I loved the Billy Cobham. Not Stratus, not Spectrum. I forget the name of the song. I'll think of it in a sec. But anyway, that's kind of what I was trying to do on Elephant Gun, was trying to play something like, Alex or Billy Cobham with that double bass rock shuffle with the ghost notes.
Yeah, what a tremendous, just some great stuff back then. Guys, we're talking to the tremendous Gregg Bissonette. I know he's got to go. We got a couple more before you let him, and I can't thank him enough. Gregg, what do you like to see different from drummers today, if anything?
What do I like to see that I think drummers have now that they didn't used to have?
Yeah, what do you want to see in drummers today that you're not seeing? Maybe they're missing the point to you, or is everything good to you?
That is a great question. What I'd like to see in drummers today that I don't see enough is, and it's very hard in 2017, I travel around the world. I get to Dixon drums and Sabian cymbals, DW pedals, Vic First Sticks, Remo drum heads, direct sound headphones, Onyx mics. They send me around the world to do clinics, seminars, drum festivals, and I see all over the world a lot of drummers that sit in a room by themselves and play drums, and they sometimes put on their headphones and they play along with YouTube, or they play along with my favorite website that I'm a part of, Drum Channel. Play enough with other musicians live. Right. You can have the best groove in the world, or when you're playing with a click track, but you're following that click track. You're following that track that's already done. When you play with a bass player that rushes or drags, it's your job to be able to control the groove. Don't let them push you or pull you, and then you add a guitar player in the mix, keyboard player, singer, horns, strings, whatever. It's our job to start the tempo at the right tempo, to keep it the right tempo, and it's really something you can only get when you play with live other humans that have a heartbeat. Because depending on whether they've had 2 or 3 espresso Starbucks or they just broke up with their girlfriend, people get in funny moods as we go through life. Those moods affect their tempo. It's our job as a drummer. Get the tempo from your little starting, song starter, but keep that tempo, lock it in, and you only get that dynamically interacting with other musicians live.
Gregg, I got goosebumps because I talk about this so much. Great stuff. We could play to a click track. We could play to a pre-recorded bass line. That's fine. But what I don't like about that, Gregg Bissonette, is those click tracks don't make mistakes. We need to make mistakes. We need to have the bass player make a mistake, Gregg Bissonette, because we need to see how we're going to adjust to all these mistakes.
Yes, I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, just great stuff. Guys, we're talking to the great Gregg Bissonette. Gregg, from metal to rock, from big band to Ringo, it's always been the same recipe for a Gregg Bissonette behind the kid, or do you have to assess each situation differently?
Well, it's both, Joe. That's a great question. It's the same recipe. Being prepared musically for the gig, for the style, dynamically, knowing the songs, loving. A lot of people say, how do you do these different gigs, styles? I want to do more of that. Well, do you love this kind of music? No. Well, you got to love it, or you won't be good at it. So I love all these different styles, and I especially love Ringo and all of his solo work and the work he did with the Beatles. But I'm a huge fan of the music. That's first. So being musically prepared, and then the other half of the pie is people skills, knowing when to talk and when to not talk, trying to lift people up, trying to get along with people from all types of religious and political backgrounds. You know, it's really important to know when to say things, to know when to not say things, to have your opinions, but to know when to keep your opinions to yourself. That's just life. That doesn't go in just the music. That's with any business or just people skills. And so, so yeah, the recipe is the same. People skills, lifting people up, you know, being someone that people want to hang around with. You don't have to be the court jester, always goofing around, but you want to. Humor and laughter is so important in life and in healing. If you can make people laugh, and if you can just lift people up, compliment people. I'll tell you what, I gave the great Steve Lukather, a compliment about 6 months ago, and he looked at me like, really? I said, yeah, that solo you played on Richard Page's country song. I said, that's the highlight of the night for me. That solo, that's the best solo you play all night. You just really, he goes, really? You're kidding. I said, no, really. Even guys like Steve Lukather need and want compliments from their peers. Instead of putting people down, lift people up, you know, in an honest way. And so, but the second part of your question I want to get to also, you said, is the recipe the same? Or are there things you do different? Yes, Joe, there are things you do different. When I played with David Lee Roth, he wanted more power all the time. Come on, man, hit harder. My hands were bleeding. I started wearing gloves. The blisters, you know, were like, wow, I was taping up, wearing drum gloves. He wanted it so hard. Man, he wanted people playing so hard and aggressive. He goes, come on, man. You know, he wanted that power. Well, with Ringo never redlines the drums, Joe. Ringo pulls the sound out of his drums. And one time we were doing a Rick Derringer song, and he leaned over and he said, were we playing too loud on that? And I said, if you think we were, we were. He said, yeah, let's ease up a little. Because you watch him play. You watch John Bonham play. People think they're going to sound like John Bonham by breaking sticks, drum heads, and breaking cymbals. John Bonham played very, very much in the dynamic tone of Buddy Rich. He was a big Buddy fan. He hit about the dynamics of Buddy, I think. And he also tuned his drums like Buddy. That open bass drum. He played in a rock band. It was a different thing. They used room mics, you know. But then you don't want to overplay. So for every style you play, you got to really be aware dynamically, stylistically, the amount of swing, and straightness. You know, there's really only two kinds of music, straight and swung. You got to really find that style and nail it.
Great stuff, brother. I got two more before I let you go. You know, Greg, if you could do it all over again, brother, if you could do it all over again, would you mimic the same career, or would you want to be in that one band that's the best in the world?
That is the greatest question, because I have a lot of students that ask me, you know, I'm in a band and we're going to make it, and, you know, that's all I want to do. I don't want to learn to read. I don't want to learn different styles. I don't want to go to college. I just want to be in this one band forever. And I tell them, man, if you are in the next Foo Fighters or the next Blink-182 or Dream Theater or the Beatles or the Stones or the Police or the Eagles, God bless you. But your chances are not very good that will happen. And you're subject to the weakest link in the chain. If your bass player is a real mess up and he blows the record deal for you because he didn't show up for the showcase, you know, you're subject to the weakest link in the chain. For me, I would do it exactly the same way. And this is my parents' advice too. You know, I went to college, I got a music education degree, so if I didn't make it as a player, I'd be able to teach middle school, high school, college band, and I'd love it. But I did make it playing. I didn't end up using the degree, but I use it when I do clinics. But I wanted to be the most well-rounded guy that could fit into different situations. Well, Maynard needed a new drummer. David Lee Roth started the band. He needed a drummer. Jeff Lynne went on the road with ELO. I got to be the drummer. Santana needed somebody to play a session. Ringo needed somebody else in the All-Star band. And I am so blessed that I've got to do all these things because of that approach.
Well, brother, speaking about being blessed, my daughter, who is my life, she'll be 10 years old. A couple of years ago, we started going to church together. I'm back going to church. I love going to church. It's one of the only places where I could actually relax for 45 minutes. I am a big church guy. Once again, I was an altar boy when I was young. Gregg, when it's all said and done, brother, and we hope it's not for 30, 40 more years for you, and God bless you. When it's all said and done, and you're standing before St. Peter, and he says to you, Gregg Bissonette, you've had a Hall of Fame drumming career, one of the best ever, a beautiful human being, a tremendous father, and he asks you this question: how can you, Gregg Bissonette, make heaven a better place? What would you say?
Whoa, what a question. And you know what? I'm going over Mulholland Drive on the 405, so if it cuts out, I'm going to call you right back. It's kind of a dead spot, but what would I say? I couldn't make heaven a better place, but what I would say to that question is, when you go to church, for me, when I go to church, the best thing I can do is worship, and sing songs, and thank God. And I think, in my mind, that's what heaven's going to be about, is thanking God. Singing praises all the time to God, because, I just want to be one of the people up there with, my parents and Louis Bellson singing God's praises in heaven, and maybe that'll be a good thing for heaven. The more people singing God's praises, I don't know. That's kind of a quick answer off the top of my head, but that's a great question.
Gregg, I don't know what to say to you. I've been a fan. I've been trying to get you for the longest time, and you were nice enough to help me and Daniel Glass out on our Gene Krupa show. I wanted to thank you again for that. But this 45 minutes, it's been special to me. And I have my favorites of all time, you, Scott Rockenfield, Simon Phillips, and I've interviewed all of them. And when you get to talk to these beautiful human beings for 45 minutes, it's so special. So I want to say thank you. And my last question is this. I asked all my main guests, on a scale of 1 to 10, brother, how would you rate this interview, honestly?
Oh, I was just about to say, when you said it was great doing the interview, this is one of the most prepared and really great questions, and also you really listen after you ask a question, and sometimes people tend to interrupt a lot. This was a 10, Joe. By far, this was a 10.
Gregg, I can't thank you enough. Please tell us about this guy you're playing with, Ringo. I'm not sure we've heard of him, so tell us what you're doing, what's going on with him.
Yeah, well, I get to tour the world with my drum hero. He's 5 feet away from me, and all I want to do is stare at that snare drum and make sure I don't flam with Ringo, because he's got the groove that I've always practiced to growing up, and he's an incredible friend and just a great, great man. And it's all about peace and love and going around the world and spreading his peace and love to everybody.
I can't thank you enough, brother. I hope to do it again. God bless you. Have a great day. And Gregg Bissonette, from all of us at Around the Kit, we thank you. And just God bless. And we'll talk to you soon, brother. Thanks so much.
You bet, brother. Thank you, Joe. And goodbye, everybody, for now. But we'll talk soon. And God bless you.
The great Gregg Bissonette. Thanks, brother. Have a great day.
Thank you, brother. You too. Bye-bye.
Great stuff. Wow, guys, just great stuff from one of the best of all time. Tremendous stuff. I know so many people who know this legendary drummer and just have nice things to say to him. So just once again, goosebumps to the great Gregg Bissonette, and we thank him once again. Thank you to the great Gregg Bissonette.